Day number 2. Is that everything? Fine.
What?
I'm the impromptu chair of this committee. We lost Charles Small, could not make it, so we have an addition that will be coming up. But to start off, Itamar Marcus, an Israeli political researcher, founder and director of the Palestinian Media Watch, served as director of research for the Center for Monitoring the Impact of Peace, has worked for the Education Subcommittee of the U.S. Senate and Committee on Allegations. He's going to talk about the Palestinian Authority's Islamic war against Israel and Jews.
Thank you very much. Palestinian Media Watch was founded in 1996, and this was 3 years after the signing of the Oslo Accords. We wanted to know what was happening in the internal world of the Palestinian Authority in Arabic. We knew what they were saying in English. We wanted to know if what they were saying in English was the same message that they were giving to their own people in Arabic. And to this end, we really are using the media as a window to all of Palestinian society. We're not really critiquing the media. As we've learned over the years, what we're looking at is everything that's happening in Palestinian society that's being reported. And that includes things like even sports pages, cultural events, even crossword puzzles that appear in the official dailies. We study Palestinian school books, and now we've expanded and we study the Facebook pages of the leadership, their YouTube pages. And what we're getting is a total sense of where the Palestinian leadership is going with its people. And what we're looking at is to what extent this is different from the message that they're giving to the international community. And as the title of this presentation is the Palestinian Authority's religious war, Islamic war, it's clear this is not a message that is ever going out to the international community. And that's what I want to focus on today, is how they present the conflict to their own people. Is it merely a matter of meters, of yards, of territory? Or is it something much, much more intrinsic, and which is, of course, we've been discussing the last few days, talking about the global, the jihadists and the global Islamic war. What we're talking about here is how the Palestinians, or to what extent do they present the war with Israel and with the Jews as Islamic based? Now, just to give you a sense, I wrote here that I mentioned that we even study sports pages. Just to give you a sense how important something as innocent as sports can be, we have reported on probably over 150, 200 examples over the last few years of sporting events named after terrorists who've killed large numbers of people, and we're talking about official Palestinian Authority events. So, for example, there was the Abdel Basr Udeh championship soccer tournament. Who is Abdel Basr Udeh? A suicide bomber who blew up 31 Israelis at the Passover Seder. That was done by the Palestinian Authority Ministry of Education. Recently there was a ping pong tournament sponsored by Jibril Rajoub, head of their sports authority. Ping pong tournament named after Dalal Mughrabi. Bus hijacker, 37 Israelis killed in that bus hijacking, the worst terrorist attack in Israel's history. We've had summer camps in the sports pages named after people like Wafa Idris, the first female suicide bomber. Ayat al-Akhras, the youngest female suicide bomber, age 17. So sports then becomes a very significant aspect by which the Palestinian Authority is transferring the messages to their people. And that is true of all of these areas that we study. We get great insight into where the Palestinian Authority is bringing its people. Now, in terms of our topic today, the first part is Palestinian Authority denies Israel's right to exist in the name of Islam, and then the second part is denying Jewish individuals' right to exist in the name of Islam. And I want to let the Palestinians speak for themselves, really. Let you see how they present this to their own people. What are the messages that they're giving to their own people in these two categories? And this is critical, and I'll go back to the titles here. This is critical. The entire international community is putting massive, massive focus on this conflict. The international community is contributing probably $1 billion a year in support for the Palestinian Authority, all based on the assumption that the conflict is territorial. And what we find is that all of the money and all of the direction, everywhere they're leading it, is missing probably the most important, or certainly as important a component as a territorial component. And that's why this is so critical, because it's not just, there's also an Islamic side. Everybody here understands that is very, very critical. Now, is it just territorial? This is a statement I want to show you here from Mahmoud al-Abbas. He was, for a number of years, the minister of religion appointed by Mahmoud Abbas. Then about a year ago, he moved up and became Abbas's personal advisor on religion and head of the Sharia courts of the Palestinian Authority. And this is what he said just a few months back to Al-Hayat al-Jihad. This is the official paper of the Palestinian Authority. And he said, according to Islamic Sharia law, the entire land of Palestine is waqf, meaning an inalienable religious endowment in Islamic law, and is blessed land, and that it is prohibited, and this is the key, prohibited to sell, bestow ownership, or facilitate the occupation of even a millimeter. Now, when he says the entire land of Palestine, I'll show you in a moment by their maps and their pictures, he's talking about all of Israel, and he's saying that it's prohibited to bestow ownership or facilitate the occupation. It is not denying Israel's right to exist, it's prohibiting recognizing Israel's right to exist because it is in contravention to Islamic law. This according to the leadership of the Palestinian Authority, the religious leadership of the Palestinian Authority. I want to show you how close his statement is to the Hamas charter. This is his statement over here on the left. The entire land of Palestine is waqf. And what does it say in the Hamas charter? The land of Palestine is Islamic waqf. And then he says it's prohibited to facilitate the occupation of even a millimeter, and the Hamas charter says it or any part of it should not be squandered, any part of it should not be given up. Same identical message. So whereas everybody recognizes and accepts that Hamas packages this conflict as a religious war, here we have the Palestinian Authority religious leaders giving the identical message. Now, it's not just Mahmoud Abbas. I want to show you the other most important. These are the two most important religious leaders, and this is just literally a few months ago. This is the Mufti of the Palestinian Authority. Here he was interviewed again for Muhammad Hussein. He was interviewed at Al-Hayat al-Jihad, or he spoke at a conference, and this is what he said. The Mufti stressed, and by the way, this is a conference of Muslim scholars from around the world. He stressed the land of Palestine is waqf, again, identical message. It must not be relinquished, nor must any part of it be sold. And here he's expanding the conflict. It's not just Palestinian conflict, it's the duty of the leaders of the Islamic nation and its peoples to liberate Palestine and Jerusalem. So here he's expanding. It's not just our problem because it's Islamic waqf. This is the entire Muslim world's war against Israel. We all have to be involved in liberating Palestine. Again, very powerful message coming from the two most important religious leaders appointed, both of them by Mahmoud Abbas. Now, the message is taught to Palestinian children as well, and this is critical. All these messages I'm going to be showing you at the adult level and at the children level. And here we have a Palestinian school book. It was published in 2007, and it's still in use today. And here they're defining the conflict that they have with Israel. And they introduced this section as follows. This is a 12th grade book, Islamic Education. It's about ribat for Allah. Islam urged jihad for Allah in order to defend the Islamic nation's honor and greatness and land. The ribat for Allah is one of the actions related to jihad for Allah. Now, the difference is the jihad might be offensive, going out, expanding. The ribat is said to be defending or liberating land that is already Islamic. Defending or liberating land that's already Islamic. So that when they tell you that the land is waqf and that we have a ribat, it's a higher level of responsibility. Jihad needs certain conditions, you have to be able to, whereas a ribat is seen as something that's mandatory all the time because the land is already Islamic and is the longer, and it's continuously being defiled by being under the rule of the infidels. And then they continue to teach the children in the school book, Palestine's people on their land are one of the greatest of the ribat. They get a great reward for Allah. The residents are in a constant fight with their enemies. They're in ribat until resurrection day. They're in ribat till the end of time. It's not going to stop with a peace treaty or an agreement. This land is holy land. And then they go as follows, and here they're giving the youth sort of a sense of history and destiny in terms of the entire Muslim nation. They say history testifies that the Battle of Al-Yarmouk decided the fight with the Byzantines, the Battle of Hittin decided the fight with the Crusaders, the Battle of Ain Jalut decided the fight with the Mongols, so that the residents of Al-Sham, which means Israel and Syria in general, and Palestine in particular, are in ribat until resurrection day again. So here you have the weight is being told to these youth, to these children, that you have the burden. You have the burden of this obligation of doing what has happened before in Islamic history, defeating the enemy on the land of Palestine, all in the name of a religious war. Now, sometimes there are even exaggerations and distortions of Islamic sources, and here I'll just give you an example. This is the Minister of Religion speaking, and listen to what he says about this war being, or the conflict with Israel, having already been predetermined in the Quran.
الذي منذ ذلك التاريخ ما فتئ صابرا مناضلا مرابطا على أرضه المباركة. هذه المواجهة جلية في كتاب الله.
Now, how could this confrontation with Israel, and it's clearly a confrontation with Israel he's describing here, be clear in the Quran, that confrontation to liberate the land that Israel is ruling, but here he's saying that it coming from the Quran. You'll see throughout the examples of trying to make their own ideology fit into to Islamic sources. Now, I've told you that there seems to be no difference here between, on the religious level, between the Palestinian Authority, Fatah ideology being expressed by these religious leaders, and Hamas. And I want you to know, it's not just me who's saying it. This is Mahmoud Abbas. This is at the time that he was pushing to have Hamas join and have a unity government. Listen to what he said on Palestinian TV.
إذا بالخلاصة ما فيش خلاف بيننا، إيش مختلفين؟ العقيدة؟ لا، اسمحوا لنا. السياسة؟ لا. مقاومة؟ لا. إذا إيش مختلفين؟ طيب ليش ما بتروحوا تقعوا الوثيقة؟
Okay, so again, Abbas, knowing all of this, knowing how he's presenting it to his people, knowing their ideology, he comes out and he says there's no difference as far as belief, as far as the muqawma, as far as resistance. There is no difference between Hamas and the Fatah. And that same sentence, by the way, was said just recently by the same, this is again Mahmoud al-Abbas, who's an advisor. He said, what are we, Fatah and Hamas, divided about? Do we disagree about Jerusalem, for example? Do we disagree about liberating Palestine from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea? Disagree about what? What do they disagree about? Again, this is pushing for unity. We don't disagree. Coming from very senior leaders, and this is critical. The world puts Hamas in the bad guy category, and they put the Palestinian Authority in the good guy category. The Palestinian Authority themselves are saying there is no real essential difference. And when you listen to what they say and what they teach their children, this becomes clear that the differences are nuances as opposed, and possibly focus as opposed to the actual beliefs. Now, this religious ideology, it's not the only message that comes. It's not that they're not giving a nationalistic message. I just want to give you a couple of examples that the national message, because the two come together all the time. The two come together. And here, for example, we read before that Mahmoud al-Abbas said it's prohibited to allow the occupation, even a millimeter, of Palestine. So you shouldn't think he's referring to West Bank and Gaza. Take a look here. This is the Palestinian National Security Forces from earlier this year. They started publishing a few times a week pictures of Palestine. And we've had already 50 examples like this, and here I'm going to show you two of them. A picture from Palestine-occupied Jaffa. Jaffa is also said to be occupied. And here's another example, a look at Palestine, the Negev, the Western Plain. The Negev is part of Palestine. I'm saying 50 examples. We've had the Galil, we've had Haifa, we've had every part of Israel, all as part of this series of pictures by who again? Palestinian Security Forces Facebook page. This is directly under Mahmoud Abbas. No hesitation here to present the entire land of Israel as part of Palestine or as part of occupied Palestine. Identical message that we're getting from the religious. I want to show you how culture is used. We have dozens of songs that appear regularly on Palestinian TV. This one started 2011. We heard it probably about 10 or 15 times last month. It's been hundreds of times. Listen to this song and what's coming through culture in the Palestinian Authority, again, to supplement the religious message. Palestinian Authority television is completely controlled by the Palestinian Authority, owned by the Palestinian Authority. The head of it is appointed by Mahmoud Abbas. If a song like this slipped in one time, we wouldn't report it, like I'm telling you, hundreds of times on Palestinian television. Very, very straightforward message. Again, identical message that we're getting from the religious side. So we're seeing it's coming from nationalism, from culture, even coming from sports, and certainly coming from the religious leaders, and even in crossword puzzles that appear in the official newspaper. And here's one example: a modern city in occupied Palestine. The solution is Tel Aviv. Al-Hayat Al-Jida, again, official newspaper of the PA. So it's coming from everywhere, a uniform message that there is no real Israel. Everything is either Palestine or occupied Palestine. Now that's about the present. What about the future? And I'll give you one example from a children's program, and it's important because this is a children's program. This is what kids are being taught to see, and we've had this same message on this same program over and over again. I'll give you one from a few months ago.
إسرائيل ولا عمر فتها غزة ولا شيء ولا عمر
هي إسرائيل هي أرضنا
إسرائيل أرضنا أرض 42
هي أرضنا هي فلسطين المحتلة
48
أرضنا فلسطين المحتلة برافو عليك هي حيفا يافا عكا هي أراضينا المحتلة أراضي 48 اللي احتلتها إسرائيل بال 48 احتلتها إسرائيل بال 48 هي أراضي فلسطينية رح تضلها فلسطينية وإن شاء الله رح ترجع لنا بيوم وتبطل تحت سيطرة الاحتلال.
Okay, so here we have the identical message that we see from the religious leaders coming through in a children's program. Everything is occupation. Allah willing, it will return to be us and not be under. And what are they talking about? Haifa, Jaffa, and Akko. These are Israeli cities. So the message is uniform. It's a religious message. It's a nationalist message. It's a popular cultural message to song. It's coming all through the Palestinian Authority. Now, if this is the goal, if the Palestinian Authority doesn't really recognize Israel, so why are they involved in this peace process? Why do they give this lip service to the world? And this also is used, the Palestinian Authority here builds on the Islamic justification, referring back to the Hudaybiyah agreement. Hudaybiyah agreement was after Muhammad had conquered Medina and around it, and he was heading back to Mecca. He stopped at the town of Hudaybiyah, and then, because he couldn't conquer it, he signed a 10-year peace treaty. After 2 years, and depending on who you want to speak to, and whose excuses you want to use, in any case, after 2 years, he went and he conquered Mecca. Now, I want you to listen. This is when, in 2013, this was just when new peace talks were announced. Just when new peace talks were announced, in the presence of Mahmoud Abbas. Listen to who was then the Minister of Religion, the same Mahmoud Abbas. Listen to why he tells the people we're going to renew peace talks with Israel. Listen to what he tells them.
وإحساس القيادة الفلسطينية بمسؤوليتها عن شعبها جعلها قبل ما يقارب من 20 سنة قبل 20 عام جعلها تقدم على خطوات سياسية أثمرت رغم إثارتها للجدل بإحكام العقل وتحكيم العقل والسير في الطريق الصحيح الذي يقود إلى تحقيق الإنجاز تماما كما فعل النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم في صلح الحديبية رغم رفض البعض. صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول إني رسول الله ولا أعصيه. هذا ليس معصية، هذا سياسة، هذا إدارة لأزمة، إدارة لواقع، إدارة لصراع. وبعد أقل من سنتين يعود النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم تأسيسا على هذا الصلح ليفتح مكة. هذا هو القدوة، هذا هو الأسوة.
Okay, couldn't be more straightforward. This is the example, this is the model. 10-year treaty, 2 years later he conquered. It's being said explicitly to the PA, to the Palestinian population, that the whole process, and what was his wording, what did he call it? Crisis management, politics, situation management. This is the way he described it. So this is what the peace process is, and it didn't start with Mahmoud al-Abbas. It actually started right after the signing of the Oslo Accords. Listen to Yasser Arafat himself. He said this a few times. This is one of the examples when he said it.
This agreement
It's actually English.
more than the agreement which had been signed between our Prophet Muhammad and Quraysh.
Okay, the same exact message. So since the signing of the Oslo Accords, numerous times by Arafat and people with him, and continuing today with the current Palestinian Authority leadership, the people are being presented with a message that the entire peace process is in order just to keep going. The goal is not to make peace with Israel. The goal is ultimately to defeat Israel. And what we also check is polls to see to what extent the Palestinian Authority accepts these messages they're getting. And here, this was a poll done by the Washington Institute for Near East Policy last year. And this is what they found. And this is very significant because it fits exactly what we've been documenting all these years. A clear majority, 60% overall, including 55% West Bank, 68% in Gaza, say that the 5-year goal should be to work toward reclaiming historic Palestine from the river to the sea. And then they said nearly 2/3 said resistance should continue until all of historic Palestine is liberated. And then as follows. Similarly, only 1/3 said that a two-state solution would be their leadership's final goal. Instead, almost 2/3 said it would be part of a program of stages to liberate all of historic Palestine later. This remarkable finding helps explain how a plurality of more of Palestinians can support President Mahmoud Abbas and reject a two-state solution at the same time. How do you reject two-state solution and support Mahmoud Abbas at the same time? Because Mahmoud Abbas is believed himself to be leading toward the end of Israel, and that's and this is being done by the Washington Institute. We've been in touch with them for a very long time. In fact, worked with them on the wording of this poll because they really wanted to check out what the messages the leadership was coming to the people, and this is what we told them, and this is the result of this poll. And it's clear that that's the message that's coming. You saw that children's program. Just to give a sense, this is a poll of the entire population. I'm convinced that the youth have much more extreme opinions. There was a poll done a few years ago. Palestinians were asked if they recognize Israel's right to exist. Palestinians over the age of 50% recognize Israel's right to exist. Palestinians between the age 18 and 25, 8.2% recognize Israel's right to exist. So that when we're talking about future population living at peace with Israel, we see that the results of Palestinian education has been basically completely successful. No one recognizes, or less than 10% recognize Israel's right to exist amongst the youth. And even a poll like this, it's probably weighted a bit because of the older people. The youth today probably are very, very strongly in favor of seeing the entire process as this deception process. Now, so that's the first category. First category, does the Palestinian Authority recognize Israel's right to exist? Absolutely not. On the national level, on the nationalistic Palestinian level, they don't recognize Israel's right to exist. They describe it as an occupation. They describe it as Palestine. On a religious level, they prohibit recognizing Israel's right to exist. And this is critical, and like I say, ignoring this when you're dealing with negotiations between Israel and the Palestinian Authority, ignoring this is like if a person has cancer and also has a cold, and because you can see the symptoms of the cold, you solve the symptoms of the cold, and you think you've solved the problem. It's absolutely, you haven't even touched the problem, and that's what's going on here. Dealing with the territorial issue, getting a few more meters here and there, is not dealing with the cancer which is here, which is the belief that they are prohibited from recognizing Israel's right to exist, and they have a Muslim Islamic obligation to liberate it all. Now, it gets even worse though, because Palestinian Authority, you know, Hamas includes the famous hadith, the hour of resurrection will come till Muslims fight the Jews and kills them. The Hamas has that in their charter. In fact, they introduce it in their charter with the words, the Islamic resistance movement, meaning Hamas, is looking forward to implement Allah's promise however long it may take. So that's clear. They say it right there up front in their charter. What people don't realize is that the Palestinian Authority has been using demonization and also quoting this same hadith over the years to their people on Palestinian TV, in their education, and I want to show you this also in their own words, because here we're going from denying Israel's right to exist to denying individual Jews the right to exist. This Palestinian Authority television, listen to these messages, that same program that you saw before, it's the most popular and most important children's program on PATV. Listen to what they have this young girl say.
من تحت أزيز رصاص أغنى تحيا أمة الفتح وأبو عمار أعداء الله أبناء الخنازير أفسدوا وقلعوا أشجار الزيتون والتين وقتلوا الأطفال بولادة كالثعابين وقطعوا أسلاعهم بالحجارة والسكاكين واغتصبوا النساء في الميادين ودنسوا كتاب الله على الملايين. أين أمة الإسلام؟ أين أمة الإسلام والمجاهدين؟ أين القفصة في القدس قد دنست بالصهايين؟ برافو زقفي زقفي يا حبيب.
Okay, bravo, bravo, bravo. Notice there's a blending here of religious hate speech together with nationalistic hate speech. The girl is saying that the Israelis are raping the women in the city squares. She's probably not, hopefully not old enough to even understand what that word means. It's the enemies of Allah, sons of pigs. Where are the jihad fighters? This is Palestinian Authority TV. You'd expect it from Hamas. You don't expect it from PATV. And it's not the only time. Here, listen to these girls on Palestinian TV.
سبع حبات يغنوا أغنية زيرة، تعرف عليكم؟ أنا لا أخاف البندقية فجموعكم وهم وقطعان غبية. القدس أرضي، القدس أرضي، القدس أيامي وأحلامي الندية. يا من قتلتم أنبياء الله الأتقياء، يا من تربيتم على سفك الدماء. الذل مكتوب عليكم والشقاء. يا بني صهيون يا شر البرية، يا قرودا همجية، يا خنازيرا شق.
Okay, Barak monkeys and pigs, also those who killed Allah's prophets. It's constantly drawing on the Islamic sources here to create this hatred. The same exact poem that we heard this girl, we heard from this boy last year in Palestinian TV. I won't play it again, but the identical words that he used. And of course, this is drawing from the Islamic sources, drawing from the Quran. The Quran in 3 places talks about Muhammad turning, or Allah turning people into apes or apes and pigs. In one of the references it says because they transgressed the Sabbath, which is why all the cases are attributed to being the Jews, and then the Jews in this tradition then become the descendants of the apes and the pigs. Now it's not just at the children level. I want to show you, this is earlier this year on official PATV.
ما يتعرض له كثير من المسلمين في هذه الأيام من الأذى الذي يقوم به فئات ممن طبع الله تبارك وتعالى على قلوبهم ممن جعل منهم القردة والخنازير وعبد.
Okay, now what's interesting here, aside from the making the monkeys or the apes and pigs, even the first reference, Muslims are being harmed these days by a group whose hearts were sealed by Allah. Now where is this coming from? Hearts were sealed by Allah. This is also coming from the Quran, where in the Quran, in the second surah, those who disbelieve, etc., Allah has set a seal upon their hearts and upon their hearing, and a veil, and over their vision is a veil, and for them is a great punishment. Because they're so bad, they disbelieve, they don't listen to the warnings, Allah has set a seal on their hearts. They're fixed. They cannot even change themselves. They cannot change themselves because their evil nature, their disbelief has been sealed by Allah. So the Jews therefore are destined to this great punishment. Again, he doesn't quote the whole source, but that's what he's referring to here. By the way, what's also interesting is those who disbelieve, it's not specifically a reference to the Jews here. And here this religious leader of the PA is applying this, which is a general, he's applying it to the Jews, even though it wasn't originally in the Quran said about Jews. Other religious hate speech, we've heard this, our enemy Zion is Satan with a tail. We've heard 10 children on TV saying this. This girl, this girl, recently this boy, our enemy Zion is Satan. So if you look at all these messages, Jews are the enemies of Allah, they're Satan, they're descendants of monkeys and pigs, they're condemned to humiliation and hardship. Children are growing up at an age where they are much too young to have any filtering. They can't possibly reject this. They can't possibly analyze this. And they're being poisoned at this age with this kind of... And this is what's being done openly on television. What's being done in the schools is, aside from the school books, it's hard to say what the teachers are teaching. But here it's being done openly and repeatedly on official Palestinian Authority television without any hesitation on the part of leadership. Now, occasionally they expand it even to Christians, and I want to show you, it's not usual. Hamas is usually the one that's focusing on the global, but here too, on this same program, they included Christians as targets of hatred and essentially targets of the coming jihad.
كلمة قصيدة قصيدتها كمان بتدل على المسؤولية والانتماء. قلبت الدنيا لأن المسلم باسم الله لا يقهر. تحدوننا بالبيت الأبيض وتحداهم بالصهوة والحجر الأسود. بل هم أدنى وأصغر وأجبن وأحقر. هم أشلاء من الصليبيين خيبر. يا مسلمين الأرض أفيقوا طال نيامكم برافو زقتي لصديقتنا نارا.
Okay, again, the Bravo and the Christians are descendants of the Crusaders, the Jews descendants of Khaybar. We beat them before, we've defeated them before, we can defeat them again. That's the message coming across here. And you wonder why are children of this age seeing themselves in conflict, or being taught to see themselves in conflict with the Jewish world and the Christian world, who they have to defeat. They challenge us with the White House, we challenge them with the Kaaba. So even that is presented as a religious war. They're coming with their White House, but we're coming with the religion. And again, this doesn't seem like a religious environment, but you're seeing all these religious hate messages against Jews and Christians coming in this beautiful environment that you'd be shocked if you, when you hear the kind of messages that are coming across the kids. I'll give you another example of the use of a Quranic source to promote hatred. This is just a few months ago on PATV.
أوغلت بنو إسرائيل في هذه الدماء الطاهرة. إذا كان القرآن يقول وقتلهم الأنبياء بغير حق، فكيف بمن هو دون الأنبياء؟ قتل الصالحين والمجاهدين. هذه دولة دموية، دولة إرهابية. جهادنا الحقيقي أن ننتقم ممن آذانا وآذى نساءنا وشيوخنا وآذى الأبرياء ودنس المقدسات وسرق مقومات الأمة وثرواتها. لن تنعم البشرية ما دام اليهود يعيثون في الأرض فسادا. لن تنعم البشرية بالسلام ولا بالبركة ولا بهداءة البال ولا براحة الحال، وما زال هؤلاء المفسدون في الأرض. حتى قال لي أحد كبار السن لو أن سمكة تقاتلت مع سمكة في البحر لأيت.
Okay. If a fish in the sea fights another fish, I'm sure the Jews are behind it. It's to this extent. And the message here, as much as it's silly, it's very, very powerful. The Jews are behind every problem that happens in the world. That's the message here from the Palestinian Authority. He has a weekly program of religious studies, of teaching Islam on Palestinian Authority television, official TV, and that's his message. The Jews are spreading corruption over the land, and of course, that also comes from an Islamic source. So I want to show you one final example here of the use of the Quran in a very interesting way. And this is from the Quran. And we said after Pharaoh to the children of Israel, dwell in the land, and when there comes the promise of the hereafter, we will bring you forth in one gathering. Now, there are people like Sheikh Palachi of Italy and other moderate Muslim leaders who actually say that this is the Quran prophesizing the return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel, and therefore people like Sheikh Palachi recognize Israel's right to exist as a religious imperative based on this source. And in fact, if you look at the commentators, the early commentators like Al-Tabari here, will bring you forth in one gathering, meaning we'll gather you from the graves for the resurrection day. Nothing here negative. It's only positive. The Jews are coming back to their land. Now listen to what the Hamas has done with this, and you'll see Fatah as well, the Palestinian Authority. Listen to the way they really, he quotes, and he says he's quoting the Quran, but he adds some words to the end of the verse that aren't there.
يتجمعون من كل حدب وصوب هنا في بيت المقدس وأكنافها احتلالا واغتصابا حتى يصدق وعد الله. جئنا بكم لفيفا حتى يسر ذبحكم.
I'll bring you forth in one gathering without even a pause, so that it'll be easier to slaughter and kill you. As if this was the original source, which of course it wasn't. It could be interpreted that way, and in the last part, some of the Muslim Brotherhood leadership started to interpret it that way. Basically what was happening was reality of the Jews being destroyed was not being fulfilled. The Jews were actually strengthening and coming to the land of Israel, creating a state, and then they had to justify this religiously. How is Allah letting this happen? So they take this source, add on so that it'll be easier to slaughter and kill you, and you then have the Quran now prophesizing the genocide of Jews by Muslims. And just so you should know, it's not just Hamas. This is senior PA official. I won't play the whole thing, but he says as follows: Israelis have no belief, no principles. They're an advanced instrument of evil. And then he says, therefore I believe Allah will gather them so we can kill them. I'm informing the murder of his death. They will gather them here. Again, the same message. Allah is gathering the Jews to Israel. This is Abbas Saki, senior Palestinian official, gathering them here in order to kill them as well. Now, the quote that I opened with, which is, of course, a very problematic hadith that appears in many places. And again, it's in the Hamas charter that the end of time is sort of contingent. The Jews will experience genocide. I want to show you, and I mentioned this yesterday, this is the Mufti of the Palestinian Authority at a Fatah event, and listen to how he says, he takes this source and he literally applies it to today. And this is critical. It's not some future. This is something he's applying to today. The entire conflict that Fatah is fighting with Israel, he says, is based on this. And also note how the moderator introduces him when he comes up to speak.
يقول 47 عام عن انطلاقة الثورة. أي الثورة؟ الثورة الحديثة، الثورة الحديثة في تاريخ الشعب الفلسطيني، وإلا فلسطين كلها ثورة في الواقع. منذ جاء عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله عنه إلى يومنا هذا وإلى أن يرث الله الأرض ومن عليها. ففي صحيح الحديث وفي الصحيحين يقول لنا البخاري ومسلم: لا تقوم الساعة حتى تقاتل اليهود، فيختبئ اليهودي وراء الحجر أو الشجر فينادي الحجر أو الشجر: يا مسلم يا عبد الله، هذا يهودي ورائي، تعال فاقتله، إلا شجر الغرقد. لذلك ليس عجيبا أن تروا الغرقد يحيط بالمستوطنات ويحيط بالمستعمرات ويحيط.
Okay, that's the critical part here at the end also. The Israelis know that their end is coming, and that's why they're planting this tree to protect themselves. So it's not just that it's happening today, and the Israelis know that's why they're fearful. Again, critical, this is Fatah. This is the Mufti of the Palestinian Authority, Fatah. This is not just the Hamas. It's a uniform religious message coming from the thing. And again, look at this poll that was taken. Palestinians are hearing this from Fatah. They're hearing it from Hamas. And this was even presented as a Hamas statement in this poll that was done a few years ago for the Israel Project. And again, they also coordinated with us on this. We were showing them how much this was being used. The person here, I will read some statements that come from the Hamas charter. For each statement, please state whether you believe it or not. And then they read this, and 73% believe in this, 22% no. So you're talking about an overwhelming majority of the Palestinian population believing that they have this destiny to bring about the death of Jews, the killing of Jews. And if we go back to what I started with, mentioning some examples in the beginning, sporting events where suicide bombers can go in, like Abdul Basir Udeh, and blow up 31 people at the Seder, and then they'll name sporting events after him, as well as hundreds of other examples. It's because killing of Jews is being presented as something that is positive. It's something that the suicide bombers are all called shaheeds, religious martyr, a martyr, something that can't be a negative act. So it's a religiously positive act to kill Jews. Why? Because the Jews are destined in any case for the genocide, and if you're involved in killing Jews, it all fits into this larger plan. I just want to end with one other item, if I have another 2 minutes or so, Richard, and this is about the Hamas. Here the PA has been focused mostly on seeing the war with Israel. I want to mention, I mentioned this yesterday, we talked about Rome. This is a Hamas religious leader, and here the war is beyond. If the Palestinian Authority focuses on their religious war against Israel, the Hamas, even though they're fighting Israel, they're focused really on the global war. They see themselves in their charter, they talk about it, the war defeating Palestine is really just one domino for them. Eventually there's not going to be a separate Palestine, it's all going to be the Islamic world. In any case, this is how it's going to happen. This is a Hamas member of parliament and religious leader on TV.
وعما قريب إن شاء الله ستفتح روما كما فتحت القسطنطينية التي تنساح في أوروبا كلها ثم تلتفت إلى الأمريكتين بل إلى أوروبا الشرقية لهذه المهمة، مهمة إنقاذ البشرية من نار هم على شفا حفرة منها.
But so clearly here, like I said, this is the Muslim Brotherhood ideology. This is what's going to spread out and conquer Americas, Europe, etc. Also note critical, and this is in our mission, saving humanity. This is something that's very often added on. It's not something negative. We're bringing World War III on humanity here, but it's in our mission to save them. Because otherwise they're going to burn forever, everlasting burning. So therefore, just because we're bringing about death and destruction, don't see it as something negative that Islam is positive. It's actually something positive. We're going to bring, this is our mission, to save humanity. So going back to Fatah, and going back to where I started, one of the most focused on, or probably the most focused on conflict in the world internationally is the Israel-Palestinian Authority. Palestinian Authority getting more than $1 billion in foreign aid to build structures, to build a state. Palestinian Authority tells its people that the end game is destruction of Israel, a nationalistic level, and it's mandatory on religious level. The entire international community completely ignores this, and as I said in the beginning, they're dealing with the cold, they're not dealing with the cancer. Thank you.
By the way, Itamar, that last quote from Hamas is a perfect example of what I describe as apocalyptic millennialism.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I ended this.
And what Robert J. Lifton describes as destroying the world to save it.